Hello, everyone. This is Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Thank you so much for joining my Small Business Solutions webinar. We're going to be giving everyone a couple more minutes to join the webinar, and then we will get started. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll be back in just a sec. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland's 8th District. Welcome to my Small Business Solutions webinar. For those who are not able to stay for the entire seminar, fear not. We are recording it, and my office will send a follow-up to all the registrants after the event so we can share the video with you in case you miss any of it. Now, the goal of today's webinar is to share information about financial relief programs and resources that are available to Maryland small business owners or operators, and to answer the questions that you've gotten. And I want to thank everybody for sending their questions in. We have assembled key federal and state experts to discuss the small business financial relief components of the CARES Act that are now available to our small businesses, our workers, and nonprofits that have been so profoundly affected by the coronavirus crisis. There are two main provisions of the CARES Act that today's webinar will review, and those are the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, or the Triple P, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I'm thrilled that we've got representatives from the U.S. Small Business Administration on the webinar. The CARES Act also contains excellent provisions and $260 billion for expanded and increased unemployment compensation benefits for people who've been thrown out of work during the coronavirus crisis. All of this money that Congress approved will go to the states, and so the Maryland government is, of course, central to the successful and efficient distribution of funds and administration of all the new provisions. I'm happy that we have state officials from the Maryland Departments of Commerce and Labor with us to discuss these provisions in depth. And I'm grateful to have this excellent panel of federal and state officials together who have assembled to share all the essential information that we want to offer during today's webinar. I will now turn to them for their presentations. First, from the U.S. Small Business Administration, we have with us Antonio Doss, who is the District Director of the SBA's Washington Metropolitan Area District Office, which has jurisdiction over Montgomery County. Welcome, Antonio. Also from SBA, we have Stephen Umberger, the District Director of the SBA's Baltimore District Office. Stephen's district office has jurisdiction over my constituents in Carroll and Frederick counties. Thanks to both Stephen and Antonio for being with us today, and I now yield to them for their opening presentations.
Antonio, are you on mute?
Oh, Antonio, you've got to unmute your phone. Well, Stephen, maybe we could start with you.
Okay, sure. Antonio must be having some technical difficulties, but that's fine. I'm Steve Umberger, SBA Baltimore, and like the Congressman said, our jurisdiction includes the entire state outside of Montgomery and Prince George's, but specifically here today, Carroll County and Frederick County. Could you have the next slide, please? And we have added something here, which is what we're going to cover. We're going to cover some payment deferrals to augment cash flow. We're going to talk about economic injury disaster loans, the application process, application support that's available through SBA, the Coronavirus Act, Relief and Economic Security Act, or CARES, Payroll Protection Program. And we will also talk a little bit about some of the resources we have in our SCORE, America's Counselors to Small Business, and Small Business Development Center Network. Antonio, are you on?
Let's see if I'm on now. You can hear me now, it sounds like.
Yes, you're there now. Why don't you take it from here?
Are you able to hear me now, Steve?
Yes, we got you, Antonio. You can proceed.
Okay, alrighty, thanks. All right, so let me just jump right into this with our loan deferment option, if we can go to the next slide. One of the key pieces I think that is important for everyone to know, in addition to all the excellent work that members of our legislative and executive branches have put forward, there's been a big, huge component that's been helpful with regard to what the federal banking regulators have done. And they've created an option for anybody to go to their bank and say, hey, my business is right now dealing with a lot of challenges related to the specifics of things that are happening with COVID-19. And they can have, the bank can defer your loan payments. They can create a loan modification and basically allow you to not make your payments for several months. You'll have to work with your bank for the specific timing on how that will work. But that's something that you could not normally do with a bank, because normally the bank would get written off their loans and the regulators would look unfavorably on that type of a situation. But they have made an unusual and very broad statement that says banks, financial institutions, work with these small businesses, help them to get through this crisis. And if you go to the next slide, you can see also that, I think we're going to the next slide. At SBA, we are also doing a similar approach, and our administrator has pushed for these things. Administrator Carranza, one of the things that she said was, if you've got a 7A or 504 or microloan, you can defer that up to 6 months, that payment. If you have an existing SBA loan, we're also deferring those for all the way through the end of December if you have an existing disaster assistance loan. So this is an action you can take that doesn't require much of an application at all. It's a communication with your bank. A lot of them have somewhat greased the skids to make this process a lot quicker and easier. So I would highly recommend, if you've got outstanding debt, to take this action on, because it's one way of not making a payment that you currently have to make right now and being able to use those monies for something else that you need within the working capital of your business. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Our economic injury disaster loans are ones that are designed to help us with the disaster support. And it's basically, if you're a small business, if you think about it, 500 or less employees, you're a small business. If you've got something more than that, you can consult your size standards. There are some exceptions for businesses that have multiple locations that could also affect these numbers. But these are for small businesses as well as private nonprofit organizations, regardless of the size. And next slide, please. These organizations I want to comment on Religious organizations were originally not able to participate in these programs, but based on a ruling that just came out over the weekend, as a matter of fact, we have now extended the ability for faith-based religious church organizations to also take advantage of these economic injury disaster loans. We're rolling out more of the specifics around how that works, because that literally just was a change that happened over the weekend, and we'll have more information to share with you on that. Next slide, please. The funds here are designated for up to $2 million. We have a low fixed rate for 3.75 for businesses. Key pieces on this particular slide is that we're waiving the first payment. This was one of the administrator Carranza's action, was to waive the first payment all the way for a full 12 months. So if you get the loan, let's say on May 1st, then you're not actually making a payment on it until May 1st, 2021. So you also have a 30-year repayment period. So it makes it extremely affordable compared to typical working capital that might be something like a year to 3 years at the most that you would have from a bank. Okay, next page, please. These funds are for working capital, so think fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, other things, utility payments, etc. It's not meant for business expansion. And I'll talk in a minute when we cover the PPP program, how it ties into the fixed debts component in the payroll part of it in particular, how there's a connection here. Okay, next slide, please. We'll briefly go through this slide and we'll keep moving. The SBA will assess a borrower based on our standard economic criteria, which basically is we're a cash flow lender, not a collateral lender. We can go to the next slide. And for loans $25,000 and less, there's no collateral. So I think that's the main thing you'll need to know there. We're not taking collateral on real estate. We generally would place a blanket lien filing on business assets if it's $25,000, or actually more than $25,000. Next slide, please. And because these are direct loans that SBA is doing, the borrower goes directly to our SBA.gov website. They do not go through a lender for the economic injury disaster loans. These are the only direct loans that SBA does, are those related to physical or economic disasters. And of course, we're in a pandemic, so that qualified us as an economic disaster. And the next slide, please. And we should have one that starts with PPP. Maybe a couple more. Okay, here we go here. All right, great. So we'll talk now about the Paycheck Protection Program. Of course, this is a funding that was authorized through the CARES Act just really 2 Fridays ago. It's designed to help workers stay on the payroll. So the idea behind this is that the government will give a loan to a business to help them cover 8 weeks of payroll and other related expenses, including rent and mortgage interest, utilities, etc., with the idea that those dollars will be covering the payroll, keeping people employed, and then at the end of that 8-week period, if the borrower, and we can go to the next slide, if the borrower has used all of those funds, then for those purposes, or the majority of those funds for that purposes, then they won't have to actually pay that funding back. So that's the great piece about this. Now, any business is eligible if they've got less than 500 employees, in a similar situation also with regard to our size standards. It's also designed for sole proprietorships, for independent contractors. The framers of this legislation were careful to make sure we were inclusive of as many business types as we possibly could. So we're hoping that we got the gig economy and everybody covered in this in a good fashion. We can go on to the next slide, please. So again, if the funds are used to primarily cover payroll costs, 75% or more, we don't have to worry about a repayment. These loans are also deferred for 6 months, so there's no payment even if you don't get all of it deferred, the borrower doesn't have to make a payment for 6 months. And we are not requiring any collateral or personal guarantees. And again, next slide, please. No fees. These loans are set up in a way that is extremely different from most typical loans. So there's no fees related to it at all. And again, the major issue here is about maintaining the employees and their salary as during this particular time. Next slide, please. And again, the interest rate is very low at just 1%. There's a maturity of this on 2 years, so it's 2 years to repay the remaining balance or the residual that's left off of what wasn't payroll related. And then lastly, if you've got information that you're looking for more in detail on this, our SBA.gov website, Paycheck Protection, you'll be able to find the information you need there. And let's see, we have another slide. Yes, okay, so one last thing, I think it's really important for business owners to realize and know that not only does the government have funding support to help you, there are fundamental questions that every business owner has to deal with right now because the COVID-19 has just kind of changed so much. So if you've got questions, you can certainly consult one of our free business coaches or mentors where they don't charge you a thing for one-on-one consultation, whether it's SCORE, our small business development centers, our women's business centers, or our veterans business outreach center. They're all available to help you. And so we encourage you to take advantage of those folks. And I think that's our last slide. And I'm sorry, I probably went a little bit long. And Steve and I can assist during the Q&A period.
That's terrific. And I want to make sure, did Steve get the opportunity to say everything he needed to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that there's three fundamental avenues. One is the relief that SBA provides on the existing SBA guarantee loans and disaster loans, relief provided directly from SBA through the economic injury disaster loans, and relief through the banks through the Paycheck Protection Plan loans. Although their loans, there are debt forgiveness and deferment components to two of the three. And if you take a look back at this slide presentation afterwards, have any questions, contact Antonio or myself.
Terrific. Okay, Antonio and Stephen, thank you for that tremendous information and a great presentation. I really appreciate it. I want to just throw in here a little piece of information I just got, which is that credit unions are also authorized administrators and lenders in the PPP program. Next, let's go to the Maryland Department of Commerce Secretary, Kelly Shulz. Secretary Shulz was my colleague in Annapolis when we served together in Maryland General Assembly, and she's been integrally involved in this process. Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary Shulz, and I yield to you now for your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate the opportunity to address our shared constituencies in your district and really talk about what those resources are. I'm very thankful for our federal partners, particularly. We've gotten to know each other really well with our SBA partners and what we can do to be able to assist each other and our shared customers that are coming through the programs. So if your listeners have not heard already, the Department of Commerce has taken down our grant and loan program applications from our website. So we are no longer at this point in time taking applications for those funding programs. We received thousands of applications. Many people are asking where we are in the process of being able to distribute those funds between the grant program and the loan program. And as you may imagine, getting our internal systems up and running in order to be able to process an unprecedented amount of requests meant that we built an entire IT database system from scratch in about 10 days. And so now that process is fully up and running and processing the grants and the loan program funds to be able to go out to those applicants, those businesses that need it the most. Happy to take individual questions about that, or anyone can email us at secretary.commerce@maryland.gov. And I just want to, these SBA programs that were just discussed and the other programs, we have a wonderful website, and thank you very much. I think that there's a link to it on possibly the next slide. But we have a website on the Maryland Business Express that really does a wonderful job in talking about all of the programs between the federal programs and the different state programs, Department of Commerce, the Department of Labor, who I know you're going to be hearing from next, and really wonderful information for businesses to be able to kind of gather in one spot what they may need. But on this slide specifically, we do have the Emergency Relief Manufacturing Fund. That is a fund that we are still accepting applications for. And this is in response to the national shortage of personal protection equipment, ventilators, anything that's out there that we're able to be able to incentivize Maryland-based manufacturing companies to quickly and succinctly start to manufacture these types of critical needs that our health department and our emergency management agency have identified. So what this program does is it takes existing manufacturing companies, and if they can quickly either purchase new equipment or bring on new workers, or to train new workers to be able to produce this, we can provide up to $100,000 in a grant for them to be able to quickly get this taken care of. So the application went up about 10 days ago. We do have many Maryland manufacturers in the state that have taken the opportunity to fill out these applications. And we have an independent advisory grant review team that's looking at them and looking at the viability and what we can do to quickly get the needed supplies into the healthcare system. So I'm very excited about that. And I think this goes to the question of resilience and innovation. Marylanders are very, very resilient and very, very innovative, and that's just the history of who we have always been. And being able to see some of these businesses that have come forward to be able to identify just even some minor changes in their existing systems to be able to help with this very important cause. The other program that our Maryland State Arts Council has been able to come up with was being able to repurpose some of their existing funds that they have to help local artists who, quite frankly, may not have any other resource from any of these other grants. They just might not qualify for them. So these are emergency grants for those independent artists to be able to make sure that when this is all over, they still have the ability to do what it is they need to do. And then obviously the other resources that are on our website are pre-existing and had already been discussed by the SBA officials. So we can move on to the next slide, if there is a next slide. So before we move over to another panelist, I just want to talk about a little bit to give the business community an idea of what we're doing besides processing these loans and applications at this point in time. And it's all about looking towards the future. And Congressman, I believe, as you know, there is going to come a time when this crisis will be over. And when this crisis is over, we have to be ready as a business community to be able to act quickly and look at what it means to open up our doors again to the general public. So with that, we looked at the industries that are the hardest hit. And the most immediate hit was on the tourism industries, and everything from our hotels and our restaurants and, you know, the attractions, the retail community. We've decided to bring a group of industry organizations, business leaders, and partner organizations from all across Maryland, and we formed what we are calling the Tourism Recovery Task Force. And that task force is currently meeting as of this week. And we're talking about some really important issues about how to bounce back and what the CARES Act will be able to get us over to the next hurdle, just to keep the doors open and keep the money flowing for a short period of time. But we have to identify areas and barriers, like working with our local health officials across the state about approvals for occupancy and being able to get those approvals back again. What will the occupancy look like in the future? Are there still going to be the social distancing restrictions? What is it going to look like to be able to rehire a local workforce? And what are some of the challenges, particularly in the hospitality industry, where they may be reliant on workers from outside the country, let's just say. And how do we get them to start thinking about restocking the goods and relaunching the services that they have in a timely manner so that they can take advantage of, opening their doors as quickly as possible. So we're really excited about this ability of this community coming together to talk about those very serious topics. And we have started those conversations, and we will be expanding into other different types of industry groups and overall business task force so that we can be prepared in Maryland to really be open for business once this crisis has adjourned. So with that, I will allow the next speaker to move forward.
All right, Secretary Shulz, thank you so much for that great presentation. And I'm delighted to hear that you're thinking already about reopening and what comes next when we finally get through this dark moment. Finally, we have two representatives from the Maryland Department of Labor, Michael Harrison, who's the Director of the Office of Policy Development, and Legislative Officer Andrew Fulginiti. Michael and Andrew, I turn it over to you now for your presentations.
Great. I think Andrew is going to take this first part, but we're having trouble hearing him. So I will go ahead and get started. You can go to next slide. So quickly, just want to go over our procedures and how to file the claim. We've extended call center hours. They're open 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. This is all on the website. We're asking people based on their last name to file on a certain day of the week. And I know a lot of people are having trouble getting through. We're hearing from a lot of people. We're adding staff as quickly as we can. We're training staff while social distancing in our call centers. We're adding servers.
Just to be clear, you're talking about unemployment insurance benefits at this point.
Correct.
Great.
Next slide. On our website, if you Google Maryland unemployment, you will get to our website. We have email addresses for specific unemployment insurance questions, and we have dedicated emails for employers and for bulk claim support, dedicated email addresses. And also we have numerous frequently asked questions and answers on our website. Go next slide. So quickly, just going over what was in the Federal CARES Act, there were 3 expansions of unemployment insurance benefits. First one is a flat $600 a week payment. This is on top of the state benefits, which is a maximum of $430. The state benefits are good for 26 weeks. The CARES Act extended benefits for an additional 13 weeks, which includes a $600 bump up unemployment insurance payment. If your benefits expired after 26 weeks, you are now eligible for the 13 weeks with the $600. And it also extended benefits to those typically not covered, such as the self-employed, independent contractors, gig workers, and those with the limited work history. The next slide. This is a brand new federal program. So this slide just says we are working as quickly as we can to get those benefits out to the independent contractors and gig workers as quickly as we can. On our website, we've got a screenshot of the box here. You can enter your email address to receive updates when that system will be available for independent contractors and gig workers to start applying for benefits. Next slide. And also wanted to take a moment to highlight the WorkShare program. This is a state program. It's a layoff aversion program that employers can sign up for if employers reduce wages and hours of employees, but between a minimum of 20% up to a maximum of 50% reduced wages. Those employees are eligible for partial unemployment insurance plus the $600 bump up payments until July 31st. So there's information on our website. Employers are encouraged to apply. If you apply, there's an application on the website. It'll be reviewed and you'll be contacted. And once you're enrolled, your employees can stay on your payroll, receiving healthcare benefits and other employer provided benefits, while the lost wages are supplemented by partial unemployment insurance from the state for 26 weeks, plus the $600 bump up payments. And also on our website, this is just some more information, a link to our website, phone numbers for claims centers, links to frequently asked question pages. And the last slide, the next slide is the last slide. We have many other divisions of the Department of Labor for licensing, workforce development, financial regulation questions. These are just some dedicated email addresses for specific questions not related to unemployment insurance. So I think that's a rundown of labor's benefits at the moment. We're happy to take questions at the end.
Terrific. Thank you, Michael and Andrew, so much. We will now begin the question and answer portion of today's event. When you registered online to join the webinar, you should have had the opportunity to submit your questions for our panelists. And I know that hundreds of my constituents did send in questions, and we've been poring over them and grouping them. We're going to try to get to as many of them as possible, but because of the time limits on the webinar, we may not be able to respond to each and every question that was submitted, but we will do our best to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to your question today and it was not answered either directly by the presentations or by answer to someone else's question, please feel free to submit them directly on my website. That's raskin.house.gov/contact. That's raskin.house.gov/contact. And we will get back to you with an answer the very best that we can. With that, I turn it over to my Chief of Staff, Julie Taken, for presentation of the first question.
Okay, great. We did get so many questions that I think the best way we're going to do this is to bunch a couple of them together, and I'll read the questions and the names of the people who submitted it. And the first set of questions looks like it's for the folks at SBA. And the question is about Capital One Bank. Can you please put pressure on Capital One to release their PPP application? My local bank is not accepting applications, and these are coming from Haley Mays, HM Consulting, Mark Senny, Hillendale Shell in Silver Spring, and Teresa Coombs, Living and Growing in Silver Spring. They are hoping that they can get access to these loans. So can our SBA friends help on that one?
Hi, certainly. This is Antonio Doss. I'll start, Stephen. You can jump in. I'm getting an echo. Let me try to clear that echo. Okay, so we're in touch with a lot of the banks and encouraging them to participate actively. One of the things that we're running into is, because this program is voluntary, we are seeing a number of banks and financial institutions put restrictions forward that says we will prioritize our own customers. Some have even prioritized within their own customer base certain restrictions in terms of they had to be a borrowing customer and not just a borrowing a deposit customer. And so we're hoping to have additional conversations with our lenders to and continue to encourage them to participate, because it's really important that we have as many of the banks and financial institutions actively involved in this program so we can get the dollars out. Steve, I'll yield back to you.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is, well, first of all, that's the first I heard about Capital One Bank, but we'll be sure to run it up to up the flagpole to the folks that need to know. We need all the banks participating in the program to the extent that they can and still preserve their lending institution and be within the guidelines of the FDIC. But that to me is new. So after this call, be sure to send an email up the chain to make sure everyone's aware. Further discussion is definitely necessary.
Great. Next question,
Okay,
please, Julie.
Yeah, I'll bunch these together too. Again, it's for SBA. My lender is saying they can't fund the loan at 100% of the funds I'm eligible for. Can I go to more than one lender? I received a message from my bank saying I do not qualify with no explanation. And what does the bank charge for administering loans backed by the government? Why can't the government pay the reasonable administration fees? And these questions are coming from Allison Pepper in Potomac, Edward Nicosa with Pipa Enterprises in Silver Spring, and Pilar Torres with Fathom Learning Solutions in Kensington.
All right, good. Steve.
There are no, look, Antonio?
No, you go.
I was just going to say, not knowing, it's a little unclear as to the question, but there are no fees associated with the Paycheck Protection Program. The bank should not be charging the borrowers any fees, if that's what the question was. Maybe if you could repeat that.
Excuse me for 1 second. My understanding is the bank, though, is being paid by the government. It's just not, the borrowers don't have to pay anything in terms of fees.
Yeah, and that was the question. What does the bank charge for administering loans?
Right. So the banks are being paid by SBA for these loans. There's a sliding scale fee based on the dollar amount of the loans. So we are definitely doing that, and that was to help entice the banks so that they got a fair level of earnings for this, so that they weren't losing money basically in the same process. So I'm not sure exactly what that question also means, but we are doing that part of it. The second point, in terms of not funding at 100%, I don't understand that, because if the borrower has submitted a request that complies with the guidelines, they've spelled out what their payroll costs are, 2.5 times their monthly payroll, and any additional working capital expenses they have, that's all we're asking them to provide, plus documentation that justifies it. Copies of certain financial statements that demonstrate what their payroll expense has been. And as long as they have that, there's not a reason that I'm aware of that a bank would not fund that at 100%. And I'll remind everybody again that the SBA and the government is actually doing a 100% guarantee of these loans to keep the banks from having a concern about the borrower not repaying and the bank having to suffer losses.
So in that situation, forgive me for 1 second, in that situation, what should the borrower do if the bank comes back and says, well, you qualify for $500,000, but we're only going to give you $250,000? You're saying that logically it doesn't make any sense. I mean, does the bank only have a limited amount of money that they can put up at the beginning? Is that the problem? Are they fronting the money, or is it the money that's coming directly from the SBA?
Well, Treasury is really helping us with the money. And so we have $349 billion I know there's some discussion as to whether we need to increase that amount over the coming weeks, but for sure, if they're putting in the loan request at the amount requested, we should be funding it at that level up and until whatever time we run out of funding, if we do run out of funding. And I have not heard anything that says we do not have any money available right now. So the bank should still be able to fund it at the full amount. The borrower in that case could also contact one of our offices for additional support, and maybe we could understand a little bit more about what the challenge is that they're running into with the lender.
Great, please be sure to do that. Next question, Julie.
Okay, next question is from Jill Gay with J. Gay Associates in Tacoma Park. Should I apply for unemployment or SBA loan? Are they mutually exclusive?
Let's see. So, Antonio or Steve, you want to take the first shot at that, or should we go to Michael?
The intention
I think
of
it
the
depends on
paycheck.
the nature of it. Maybe we go to Michael first.
Yeah, let's go to Michael.
Okay.
Or should we go to Andrew? Andrew, are you on the phone?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the question was, can you do both? I'm not sure I have a 100% good answer on that. I know there's nothing that would exclusively preclude them from doing so. I would just note that if they are utilizing any of the SBA programs for payroll and things like that, all income is required to be reported during the unemployment claims process. So if you are utilizing those for payroll, that would have to be reported at that time. And each unemployment claims application is unique. So I would just say that while you are definitely eligible to apply and file a claim, your eligibility for benefits will be determined kind of on a case-by-case basis. So I hope that's a good answer for you.
I think it's a good answer, but let me just expand a little bit for Jill. There's nothing in the federal legislation that prevents anyone from collecting unemployment benefits and then also benefiting from the PPP program. So imagine someone, and I've got a lot of constituents who are independent consultants, independent contractors, they're in the gig economy and so on. And they basically they file 1099s because they're not on anyone's payroll. They do contracting, but in turn, they employ other people. So if suddenly you're thrown out of work, you would be eligible to collect unemployment benefits under the program that we put together. Now, I can't say whether or not the state has any, contrary regulations, but under what we put together, you would be able to get the extra $600 a week because of the corona crisis in order to see you through. And in addition, the 13 extra weeks that we've added on to what the states are presently doing. Then in terms of the SBA side, if in fact you have a payroll and you can show, you can document the payroll, you would be eligible for 2.5 times of what your monthly payroll is. If you had a payroll of $10,000 a month, you would be eligible to get $25,000 if you keep the employees on, and that's the bargain. It's not for just the business, it is for the business for the purposes of continuing the payroll. All right. I don't know if anybody else wanted to add anything from the SBA side. Antonio, did you want to add anything or no? Let's go to the next question, Julie. That's fine.
Okay, then the next question has been submitted by multiple people in questions, and you did address it. This is for unemployment. You did address it in your slides, but I'm hoping you could expand on it a little bit more and maybe tell people. The question is, how soon can we see the unemployment forms up online for contractors and sole proprietors to apply for unemployment. And this comes from, it is a long list of people who've asked this. And your slides address it, but maybe you could give people a sense of around the time it will take to get something like that up.
Yep. So this is Andrew Fulginiti. That's an excellent question, one that we are getting a lot of as well. Again, I don't have the perfect answer for you as a time frame goes on when we will have that. The good news is that we were waiting for a long time on guidance from the Department of Labor. We received that on Sunday. That's the good news. So our teams have been working diligently to create this new applications process for those individuals that are now going to be eligible for the unemployment under the new CARES Act. This isn't a modification to our current system. This is a whole new program. So we're really working hard with our IT guys to put together an application process. Our goal is to have it up and running as soon as possible. I can say that, again, I would encourage people to go to our webpage where you can insert your email there, because one of the things that we're looking at doing is possibly collecting information from individuals prior to the application being open and having that information and put in the data put in on the back end instead of having them fill out the application. Our hopes is that will speed up the process now that we know what type of stuff we're going to be collecting. So I would encourage people to please go to mdunemployment.com, fill in your email address if you're under that category, and we're going to get notices as soon as possible to those individuals about what information we can collect from them and when they can expect to be able to start those claims processes.
Great. Next question, Julie.
The next question comes from Laurie Ekstrom with Wild Bill Sports in Silver Spring. She asks, how do I claim salary when what I take out varies from month to month? So that's an unemployment question.
It's unemployment. Okay. So Andrew, can you take that one?
Yeah, so great. That is a great question. That was kind of one of the things I think the guidance that we were looking for from USDOL. It sounds like this person may fall under the new CARES Act expansion. That's going to be part of the application process that we're developing for those individuals, how they can basically convert those salaries into a weekly wage, if you will. Those calculations, we're working on how to do that and putting together some information on how individuals can go through that process. Again, I would direct you to our webpage. We're kind of updating all of that information as soon as we have it, and I would encourage them to sign up for those notices because we will get that updated information to them as soon as we have it.
Yeah, and I would just add that independent contractors, the $600 is going to be a flat amount. The state benefits will fluctuate up to a maximum of $430. So independent contractors will have to self-certify their income, but the benefits will only go up to $430 a week. And we're working with USDOL on an application to determine the wage income.
Gotcha. Julie, next one.
Well, the next one comes from Carlo Santucci from Santucci's Deli in the Woodmore Shopping Center. As a small deli trying to stay open, how does this affect the relief amount with a loss of 2/3 of my business so far? How do I pay expenses? And I think, how do you get loans based on you're still employing people, but you do have 2/3 loss of business?
Okay, so Antonio, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, here, Steve, I'll take it. Antonio, as far as the payroll or paycheck protection program, it is based, part of your application is based on payroll, associated payroll costs, mortgage interest, those kind of things, operating expenses that were in effect a year ago, between February and I think it was February and June. So lenders understand, and that's just why in part SBA came out with these very liberal requirements and the huge amount of support with the 100% guarantee and the forgiveness of 8 weeks of payroll and associated expenses. So it's not necessarily based on what you look like today, but what your payroll was in existence a year ago, so that you assume with the assumption that that is somewhat similar to what would have been now, so that you can make those payments, bring some of those folks back, and depending on how many employees you bring back or enable to pay with those, that 2.5 times what existed last year, that's the benefit to the program, not necessarily looking at how you're going to pay going forward, because the proceeds are to be used to bring employees back or pay existing employees that you've kept on, so you can sustain operations for a period of time going forward until we get beyond this thing.
Thank you,
That's
Steve. And I want to just add 2 things to that. Okay, well, so one is that under the terms of the legislation, you can get 2.5 times what your monthly payroll is. So if the monthly payroll were $100,000 at Santucci's, you'd be able to get $250,000. That money could be spent on salary as well as rent and utilities and a couple of other approved expenses. We understand, given the way that the course of this crisis is taking, that this is likely not to be enough, and we have already entered into very serious legislative discussions and negotiations about a 4th wave of funding that will be, another economic life transfusion for small businesses and for individuals around the country. So I guess what I would say is, we understand what's happened to your business. We appreciate your hanging tough and trying to make a go of it as much as possible. We know there are a bunch of local restaurants that are still operating and that are doing deliveries to people. And so the idea is to tide you over and to get you through the crisis. And I think that we will be, in fact, doing another piece of legislation that could be as big or bigger than the CARES Act. And we're calling it right now CARES Act 2, that basically the second part of the move to help the economy stay afloat. Julie, we got time for another one?
Yeah, we do. This is from Marilyn Balcombe with the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. She's asking, will the PPP loan program be open to 501c6 organizations, specifically chambers of commerce? We need to protect our staff to help others.
Marilyn, thank you so much for sending that question in. I'm going to take that one because this is a question that's been close to our hearts from the beginning, because my district is home to a lot of C6 organizations and people that work for them, trade associations, chambers of commerce, and so on. And they've been very hard hit, just like all their members have been very hard hit by the crisis. It looks as if this was originally part of the House version of the bill, and it seems to have been taken out when it got over to the Senate. And so it's silent on this question, and we're pushing Treasury for a definitive answer of whether they'll let C6s and C5s apply to be part of the program. And we think that they belong in it, and we hope that Treasury will see it that way. And if not, we will definitely try to rectify that in the next round of legislation so that the trade associations would be able to have the benefit of the PPP program. Back to you, Julie.
Okay, it looks like this may be the last question, but I am going to bunch several together. I'll read them, and then I'll read off who sent them in. We own a yoga studio in downtown Silver Spring, and we're told Maryland can't help us since we have all 1099 contractors for teachers. Then someone else asked, my workers are subcontractors. Can I acquire a loan to pay them? And then we also have a question, can less than full-time employees be included in PPP? And this is coming from David Giacomin from Up Yoga Wellness, Vania Soares from Extra Green Cleaning Services in Silver Spring, and Thomas Strahl from the First Presbyterian Church in Westminster.
Okay, thanks for that excellent question. Steve, perhaps I could come to you on this. You get their question?
Sure. All the entities you mentioned, as long as they're small by our size standards, are eligible to make application from the Paycheck Protection Program. What you need to do is typically what you would do first would be contact your bank of account. You can go online and get the borrower's application. You can fill that out, take that to your bank, and sit down with your bank and find out what they're willing to do. It's a bank loan. You are eligible, and that's the guidance that I would give at this point.
So just to be clear about that, if I'm a yoga studio and I don't have W-2 employees, but I pay each of my yoga instructors as independent consultants, so they've got a 1099, I can show proof of that as evidence of my running an ongoing small business concern, and that will be sufficient to qualify me for the PPP loan.
I believe
right?
so, and then that goes back to what the payroll costs were in the period that is referenced a year ago. So it's
okay.
kind of it's something that we probably should look at a case by case basis if they want to contact me directly.
Okay, that's good.
And also, this is Antonio, if you can hear me, we don't make a distinction between full-time and part-time, for example, on the advance of up to $10,000. So you don't necessarily have to be concerned about someone who's working 30 hours a week versus somebody who's working 40 hours a week.
Great. Steve, were you about to give everybody your email address or phone number in case they needed to reach you?
Yeah, my phone number is 410-962-2055.
Great. And so the question they ask is of great interest to me because a lot of my constituents have thriving small businesses, but everybody is in the category of being essentially a self-employed private consultant or independent contractor. And so I've got a great interest in seeing that all of those people are eligible for the PPPs. And I was involved directly in the process of making sure for the very first time that people who are independent contractors and private consultants are eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. So that's a big breakthrough, and I want to make sure all of my small business constituents understand that as well. So both of the programs that we've been focused on today are available to you, and just because you're self-employed and you are 1099 rather than being on someone else's payroll doesn't mean that you're not eligible for unemployment benefits. All right. I take it that we have time for no more questions. Is that right, Julie?
We could probably there's a bunch of questions that maybe could be answered quickly, and it's a lot of people have applied for their EIDL applications and they haven't heard anything back. So they're wondering just really how long it's going to take to hear back from these EIDL applications. And that I can give you some names. It's Rachel Miller from Pro Action Physical Therapy in Rockville, David Collier, Stratton Networks, James Visco, Westlake Dental, Angela Freeman, Economic Development and Tourism, and Jenny Hakapian, City Dogs.
Okay, Antonio, can you answer that for us?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. Great questions. We are in the process of actually really pushing through a lot of those decisions right now. As some of you may be aware, early on, we were hit very, very hard with in terms of the number of applicants coming through for the economic injury disaster loans. And we revamped our approval program. We revamped our website portal, everything to make it streamlined and more quick to provide an answer. We're literally breaking through that backlog this week, and we're seeing a lot more responses come through to give people their updated information about their loan approval. So my anticipation is that during this week and the coming week, we'll get a lot of those through. Hard to know when everyone applied in terms of days ago versus weeks ago that asked those questions, but we are actively doing everything we can to get that communication out as quick as possible.
Terrific. All right. Well, look, I want to thank all of our terrific panelists, Antonio and Steve, Secretary Kelly Shulz, Michael Harrison, Andrew Fulginiti, for their great presentations. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and being part of the webinar. My office is going to send out a follow-up email with a video of the whole presentation for your reference. And if you didn't get your question answered today, please feel free to submit them on my website. Again, that's raskin.house.gov/contact, and we will get back to you with the best answers we can find. Obviously, this is a moving target and everything is still unfolding. If you ever have any questions or need assistance with any of the federal agencies we've talked about or others, please call my office at 301-354-1000. That's 301-354-1000. I've got an amazing staff that is here to help you. And you can also sign up for my e-newsletter at raskin.house.gov if you're not already on it, in order to stay up to date moving forward on the whole corona crisis and what we're doing to manage for our community, both in terms of the public health and in terms of education and the economy. Thanks again to our panelists. Thanks to everybody who's come to participate. And please take good care, stay healthy, and stay strong.
Thank you.